Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Martin Warnes, Chair of the Planning Committee, and I will be chairing the meeting. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping. Action in the event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the Town Hall by going down the main entrance staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being live streamed on the Council's YouTube and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute the microphones when not speaking. I don't do that next time. I'll do this first. You can. Yeah. Okay. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras. But please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We will break for a meeting at 7:30 and every 90 minutes thereafter. There are toilets on every floor in the building, and an induction loop is in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is a non-quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies, reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure. All involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek a judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on the grounds of maladministration or breach of the authority's code. So we'll now do introductions. Members of the committee and officers will introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Sam McCarthy, representing Shrub End Ward and Deputy Chair of the committee.
Councillor Tracy Arnold, Stanway Ward.
Councillor Catherine Spinler, Saints.
Councillor Kayleigh Rippingale, Newtown and Christchurch Ward.
Sam McLean, Newtown and Christchurch.
Lee Tate for Prettygate Ward.
Councillor Jackie McLean, Markstone Layer Ward.
Councillor Carl Powling, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Councillor Robert Davidson, Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Councillor Mark Gocher, Castle Ward.
Planning Officer Philip Morton.
Chris Harden, Planning Officer.
John Miles, Principal Planning Officer.
Daniel Cooper, Planning Officer.
Lucy Wandon, Planning Manager.
Simon Gans, Joint Head of Planning.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Thank you. So we have no apologies and we have no substitutions. So we'll move on to item 3, which is declarations of interest. Councillors must publicly announce the item number and whether the interest is disclosable pecuniary or any other registrable or non-registrable interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Rippingale.
So I'll be recusing myself from the item 8 because I have a predetermination because it's within my ward.
Who was next? Councillor McLean.
Yeah, same. I will be removing myself during item 8 because I'm predetermined.
Councillor Gocher.
I'll be recusing myself on item 7.7 because it's in my ward. I called it in and I've expressed views in public, so I won't be taking part in the vote.
Thank you. Okay, there being no other declarations of interest, I'll move on to urgent items. There are no urgent items. So we'll move on to item 5, which is have your say. Anyone has a petition they wish to present to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. Okay, there are none, so we move on to item 6, which is minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November 2024 are before the committee for confirmation. Are there any points of accuracy that need to be raised?
There's a mistake. I'm not named on it.
Councillor Goethe and Councillor McLean, you wish to second? Thank you. All those in favour?
That's agreed, Chair.
Thank you. With the minutes being agreed.
Sorry, Chair, that's with the addition of Councillor Tate to the attendance
Yes,
list.
thank you. Right, we move on to item 7, which is the planning applications. And I'm going to read out applications and the speakers on the Have Your Say list. So the applications before us this evening are item 7.1, which is the Bypass Nurseries, Dovies Lane, Mark Tay, and we have a speaker from the public, Ben Wallace, and a visiting councillor, Councillor Ellis. On 7.2, which is land north of Factory Hill and east of Honey Lane, Tiptree, we have a speaker 4, which is Chris Fry via Zoom, and we have a visiting councillor, Councillor Dundas. On 7.3,
Just read it out and say that.
right, say that, yeah. Okay, on 7.3, Ash Park House, Peldon Road, Everton. A speaker from the public for David Richardson is only speaking if there is an objector or the item is not taken en bloc. Item 7.4, which is 50 London Road, Stanway. We have a visiting councillor, Councillor Scott Butell, who wishes to speak. On item 7.5, King's Head Court, Colchester, we have a member of the public speaking against, which is Roy Buckland. And we have a visiting councillor, Councillor Chofferglue. Right, and item 7.6, on Mersey Road, Colchester, we don't have anyone from the public for or against, or any visiting councillors. Item 7.7, which is the High Street, we have a visiting councillor, which will be Councillor Goethe. And then item 8, we have the director's report, Abro Development Site, and that will be presented to us by Nadine Calder. Thank you. Right, okay, so we're going to take some of the items out of order. One due to the strategic importance of item 8, and because the planning determination date on items on items 7.1, 7.5 and 7.7, they are close. So we need to make sure, we need to avoid the risk of non-determination. Because we have a lot of items on the agenda, we will be taking those first. And then that will be followed by items 7.2, 7.3, 7.4 and 7.7, I think. Okay, so we will...
Sorry, Chair, do you wish to take the items on block, the two items that we can take on block?
We have got 2 possible items on block, and they are item 7.3. I understand David Richardson is therefore not speaking. And item 7.6. So, could I ask whether there is any member that wishes to speak or to call those 2 items forward to be discussed? I can't see any hands. Okay, so could I ask for a User and seconder for taking these items en bloc, and I will remind the committee that the vote must be unanimous. Okay, so proposed by Councillor Tate. Is there a seconder? Councillor McLean.
That's unanimous, Chair.
On these items. Any interested parties in attendance for those items may wish to leave now. Okay. Sorry, we move on to the items. We're going to take item 8 first, which is introduction for additional reason for refusal, Abro, Flagstaff Road, planning application 231297. And could I ask Simon to present? Thank you.
Good evening, members and members of the public. Members of the committee will recall when the Abro development application was considered back in November, when it was resolved to refuse the application primarily and principally on matters relating to design. As part of that determination process, it was overlooked that we had no legal mechanism in place to secure the relevant developer contributions, which would normally form a subsidiary reason for refusal. The purpose of this report, members, is to seek your permission to add a further reason for refusal to the decision to reflect the absence of that legal mechanism to cover all of the matters which were previously set out within the previous committee reports relating to developer contributions and obligations. This process will effectively reinforce your previous decision to refuse and add yet further weight to that decision. The reason for refusal is set out in full at 5.1 to the report, and in essence it sets out the contributions which would have been required should the application have proceeded positively and accompanied by an appropriately drafted legal agreement. And the reason for refusal identifies in those circumstances the adopted local plan policies that are therefore, that this proposal would therefore be contrary to. And your approval is sought, Chair, to add the reason for refusal to the existing single reason for refusal and to issue the decision finally. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Simon. Are there any questions? Councillor Davison.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, I wasn't here on the second hearing for Abro, and I was rather disappointed as reading this report that there was only one reason for refusal, because I certainly remember saying I felt that the lack of affordable housing, less than our 30%, should take precedence over affordability or viability. And I just wonder why that was not considered.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it was a long debate, and things, sometimes when you're in the middle of the debate, members are moving the meeting along, wanting to consider what it is they want you to consider, and it does look like that was overlooked. However, are you satisfied with the report that is in front of us?
Forgive me, that was partially addressed to Mr. Cairns as well, because the point is we don't want to lose this on appeal, and is there any opportunity to put a third reason, reduction in the 30% affordable housing, and that should take precedence over viability? Right,
So if we can just clarify what you're asking for a reduction reduction in the 30% level for affordable, right? Okay, can you clarify that, please?
Sorry, Chairman, could I ask Mr Cairns whether would be viable or helpful to have a third reason to add to the one that he's suggesting, that effectively said the lack of the loss of the 30% affordable housing, which is our policy, should take preference over viability of the site.
Okay, Simon, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the proposal on the table this evening does actually include the lack of a secure mechanism to secure affordable housing within that subsidiary reason for refusal. Members who were present at the committee on the 7th of November may well recall the drop report which accompanied the original officer's report, and did examine in some detail the whole question of viability and the lack of full compliance in terms of the 30% with policy. And the report did conclude that given the viability which had been tested and our policy framework, the policy framework does in fact allow for situations where full viability does not allow 100% delivery of the 30% affordable housing. So I think I would say that the committee did consider that point, but chose not to add it as a principal reason for refusal. So I don't think that that can be reopened this evening, Chair, but in terms of adding comfort to a point which has just been raised, the whole issue of affordable housing is covered within the suggested reason for refusal and the lack of a legal mechanism. So the appropriate level of affordable housing would be a material consideration for the inspector, just to give you some comfort.
That's reassuring. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. So, do you have any further questions on the report? I can see none. Okay, so is there a proposer to accept the recommendation? Councillor Tate, is there a seconder? Councillor McCarthy, would you all like to show those in favour?
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so we will move to item 7.1, which is bypass nurseries, and we will invite Daniel Coper to present the report.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. I will just present that. There you go. Bear with me, it's thinking about it. Bypass nurseries, returning item off of Dobbies Lane. It was first heard in middle of 2023, where the application was to regulate the B8 use there, add 2 buildings there, but also retain the access onto Dobbies Lane. That was deferred through concerns of the access onto Dobbies Lane, and a visit with highways and councillors was proposed. In the meantime, since then, they have revised the proposal. They have reduced the proposed buildings on site to be 1, so reduced down from 2, to block off the access onto Dobbies Lane and create a new access onto Old London Road. So there is the site. You can see this is the new access going through there onto Old London Road, with the A12 will be running parallel to that. Dobbies Lane is running along the northern side there. That access will be blocked up. These are older photos, probably from a drone, which was brought mid-2023, but I thought I'd bring them to show a good outlay of how the site is operating currently. Dobby's Lane is here, so this is again the access that will be blocked up. This is before it was New Stone or Nustone. This is when it was the old bypass nurseries in its original use. So that is the current Dobby's Lane access there, and we are facing towards, you would go towards Old London Road. That's looking the other way, so you can see it's quite a narrow road. And this is off of Old London Road, where the new access is proposed to come out around this area here, with the site in the background there. And that would be where they come out of the access around here and go towards, down Old London Road, towards the junction with the A120. As you can see, this site is mentioned in policy MT15 of the Marks Tay Neighbourhood Plan. It's down here represented near the Anderson site, and it's mentioned in wording down there, which for some reason, that's across it. But it's about safeguarding the employment use of this site, being consistent with the rural out of town location. So this is the proposed site, proposed drawing. They will block up Dobby's Lane over here. It's to retain the office here. This is the new building over here on the left. There is an open field this side. Neighbours are over on the north side here along Dobby's Lane. The new access will run through that field there and go out onto Old London Road there. There have been about 12 months worth of negotiations with Highways, between applicant and Highways, to get that access right, and Highways have no objections now. That is the proposed new building. 7.1 metres to the ridge, 5.2 metres to the eaves. And there is a close-up of the access proposed. Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to take some questions.
Before we do that, I will invite Ben Willis to speak in support of the application. If you'd like to come forward, please, and take your seat, and when you press the red button, your time will begin.
Thank you, Chair. The application that is in front of the committee was originally presented back in June 2023, which was a recommendation for approval at the time. This included support from the Highway Authority to the then proposed use of Dobby Lane. As Mr Cooper has eloquently pointed out in paragraph 2.5 of his report, the application was deferred to allow further assessment to be made on matters pertaining to pedestrian and cycle safety. Since this deferral, a considerable amount of work has taken place from specialist third-party highway consultants, which has gone into investigating the alternate access arrangement direct onto the Old London Road. We are delighted to be able to confirm that this has been achieved. Dobby's Lane is no longer needed to access the site, with all activity entering and exiting from Old London Road. This has been met with full support from both Essex County Council Highways and National Highways. Not only have we achieved full support from the Highway Authority, but we've also received full support from the Council's Historic Building Advisor. They note upon the closure of Dobby's Lane to HGVs in relation to our client's site, that this has a further positive impact upon the surrounding area. On the matter of the principle of development, the proposal remains in accordance with development plan policies and the neighbourhood plan. As Mr Cooper highlights in his conclusion, he and I have been working extremely hard for the past year to make sure that what is before you now is a scheme that provides the highest possible planning gain, not only in respect of highway safety, but all material planning matters. We trust the application can now be carried forward to a resolution of approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll now call Visiting Councillor, Councillor Ellis, forward. And you know the protocol by now, Andrew. When you press the button, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, and good evening, committee members. I'm here this evening to urge careful consideration of this application. Whilst I understand that the planning officers have reviewed this proposal following your deferral, and once again recommended it for approval, I strongly believe this decision requires deeper scrutiny. The reality is that this application will cause significant harm to some of the residents of Marks Tey, and I doubt we would consider agreeing to this scheme in this location had it not already been in operation. The Parish Council, together with Councillor Bentley and myself, acknowledge the steps taken to address some concerns, such as removing Newstone traffic from the substandard Dobbys Lane and hardening the site to reduce dust contamination. However, the amendments fail to resolve critical issues affecting highway safety and residential amenity. Turning first to highway safety, Old London Road, with its width of just 5.5 metres along most sections, is simply unsuitable for accommodating HGV traffic and other vehicles. Complaints from residents are frequent and serious. These include damage to parked vehicles, safety hazards from HGVs mounting the single pavement to pass, and obstruction by waiting lorries that refuse to move for residents. The situation is even worse for residents at number 280 to 286, where Old London Road narrows to 3.5 metres, creating a dangerous cul-de-sac. This stretch is also a designated cycle route to Fearing. The applicant's proposal to localise widening only at the junction is insufficient and fails to address the wider problems. This piecemeal approach not only risks confusion and disruption, but directly conflicts with Marks Tey's neighbourhood plan, particularly policy MT02, which prioritises creating walking and cycle-friendly neighbourhoods. Now looking at access. The anticipated A12 improvements present a logical access solution. The detrunking of the A12 would allow Newstone and other users to access their site directly without burdening Old London Road. While I understand this cannot be a formal planning condition, if approved, I strongly urge the committee to include a note highlighting that this access should be sought and implemented as soon as it becomes available. This would dramatically improve conditions for residents, the parish hall, and users of the A120. In the meantime, the Parish Council believe the additional conditions proposed by the highway authorities, including reliance on driver responsibility and appointment systems for HGVs, are impractical and unenforceable. Residents' complaints demonstrate that driver compliance is already lacking. The absence of dedicated HGV parking on Old London Road and unpredictable traffic conditions on the A12 and A120 further render these measures ineffective. Furthermore, the failure to widen the entire 3.5 metre section of Old London Road and the narrowness of the rest of the road is creating an accident waiting to happen, according to the Parish Council, and I don't doubt their sincerity in that belief. They should know they live there. This application, as it stands, prioritises operational convenience at the expense of local residents' safety and well-being. We appreciate that officers and committee members must weigh all factors in their decision-making, but we strongly believe that the negative impact on the community far outweighs any potential benefits. In light of this, you're not going to like this bit, Marks Tey asked the committee to defer planning consent until the strategic highway improvements are either underway or completed. I know you're going to find that difficult, but it is the common sense approach, although I do understand that planning and common sense don't always go hand in hand. Finally, if members are minded to approve the application, we would reinforce the Parish Council plea that any loss of mature tree and hedgerows should be mitigated with planting of semi-mature trees and hedgerows to preserve the rural character of the area and contain the adverse visual impact of the site. Thank you. I trust you'll give due weight to the voices of our community when making your decision.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Thank you. In a minute, I will ask Daniel and Simon to comment on the points raised by the HBSA speakers. If you could begin indicating to my Vice Chair if you wish to speak, and we will only let you in a second time if everyone else has had the opportunity to speak, because we have a large number of items and a number of call-ins. Could you be concise in when you speak, and please do not repeat things that have already been said. So Daniel and Simon, would you be good enough to respond to the public speakers?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, for the landscaping, there is a landscaping condition recommended on there, and it's not a very precise landscaping condition in that it means the whole site, so we can make sure that there are a decent amount of trees replacing any removed established trees. The detrunking of the A12, I understand that it does have permission, but funding has been pulled, and there is no indication whether or if it will come back. So that could be years. No one really knows at the moment if that ever comes in. However, while we can't condition them to join onto the A12 when that becomes detrunked, we can put in an informative advising or stating that it would be the preferred access point as and when that is possible through the detrunking. I don't know if I missed any points there. Please tell me if I missed any points to address.
Simon, do you wish to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. Just really to address one of the points raised by Councillor Ellis with regard to the access arrangements and the use of Old London Road. This really goes to the heart of the original deferral committee back in, I seem to think it was July of July of last year, so about 18 months ago. And in essence, we have no objection from either the County Highway Authority or Highways England, and we could not sustain a refusal on the grounds of the use of Old London Road. I'm rather more optimistic than my colleague with regard to the timetabling of the A12 works. I very much think that in order to support growth, the government will fund the A12 works. They haven't said they won't, and I'm sure an awful lot of lobbying is going on, including various local and regional bodies. So I don't think you will have to wait too long, and Councillor Ellis' suggestion around the use of an informative is something we can deliver for you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McLean, you're the local member, so you can go first.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support what Andrew has said, and I think it's very important that we do look after the locals in this area. They have put up with an awful lot of traffic from the Andersons and Dobbys Lane site, and it is a very narrow road, and the locals do not all have off-road parking. So there are always going to be parked cars on the road. Yes, that could be a traffic calming measure, but it's still very dangerous for the lorries going down because they are, HGVs, they're class 1, so they will need to have quite a considerable space to actually bypass these cars. And I think we need to be mindful that there is a route that you could have joined the A12 off, which they don't wish to use, which I suppose for safety reasons. But I still think we need to look after the locals and the children and the area where it is, developed with just domestic usage. So, you've got the industrial estate one end and you've got all the houses on the road, and you've got a village hall which is very highly used and it's always busy. So I think we need to be mindful really mainly of the traffic. So I would like to see more traffic calming measures for that road for the local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit concerned. First concern I have is if we defer this pending on upgrades of roads, what effect that will have on the applicant's business if this is just delayed and delayed and delayed for an indefinite period. I'm wondering if it's possible to condition it that if we approve it tonight, that there's a condition that when future improvements are made to the road, to allow access from the A12 rather than this Old London Road, if that could be a condition that goes hand in hand with an approval, so it doesn't end up with a deferral that leaves people in limbo. Sorry, I missed the point that was made earlier about trees, but obviously I'd welcome as well any kind of condition about planting trees near the new entrance point, to mitigate it, and create keep the rural setting. I think that was a good point. And I'm just wondering, how many jobs we're talking about that this application might bring to the area.
Thank you, Councillor Goetcher. I don't have any other speakers, so I will ask Simon. I will ask Simon to respond to the questions. Sorry, I'm asking Daniel to respond to the questions. Sorry.
Simon can as well, if he wants. I'm not sure we can require traffic calming measures on Old London Road. Simon might be able to clarify that further, but it is outside of the site, the red line site, and I don't think we can condition things outside of that. If it is deferred, the effect on the applicant's business, I couldn't tell you that, I don't know, but I know that they operate or they employ around 33 people currently. Or it was at the time of the first application. I don't have updated numbers, but I don't think it has shrunk. Can we condition the use of the A12? We can't condition the access onto the A12, but we can put in an informative that says that once that is detrunked, then it would be preferred for the access, for them to do an access onto there. There's a landscape condition which we can ensure that there are trees put in, if any mature trees are taken out, some semi-mature trees are put in, as Councillor Ellis would requested. Again, the job numbers, I believe it's around the mid-30s, but I don't know the most up-to-date figures on that one.
Okay, and what about the issue relating to the narrow road and residents having to park on the street, causing a danger to the lorries?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yes, with regard to the issue of traffic calming and use of Old London Road, obviously we have consulted with both Highways England, who actually do ironically have jurisdiction over Old London Road, and the Highway Authority. Neither of them have suggested traffic calming measures. However, as part of the permission for the employment site to the east, there is a pot which requires highway improvements in the vicinity of the site. So it is possible that under that pot that we can raise the issue with that developer and National Highways of the possibility of traffic calming measures on Old London Road. There will be funding available as part of the Section 106 relating to that employment site, which is also trying to come forward at the present time. It is possible under a 278 agreement of the Highways Act to require works to be undertaken to the highway. However, that is not a requirement of either of the relevant highway authorities. So an informative, as Daniel explained, promoting the use of the detrunked A12 as soon as it is available is something we can deliver, Chair, and we will also note the community's desire for traffic calming measures and take that up with future negotiations around the other employment site and the existing legal agreements provisions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davison, you wish to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I didn't put my hand up earlier. Same issues, really. I'm more concerned, I know about the damage to the vehicles along the 5.5 metre bit in front of the housing on Old London Road, and it certainly is substandard. It's difficult. I just want to be clear as to what access they're going to use on the existing A12, because obviously Anderson's entrance is still open. If they went there, that would be a lot easier for and safeguard the housing and the cars associated with that. But also, I'm more concerned about the 3.5 metre wide bit of road in front of the site. But yes, there's a slight bell mouth that they've put in, but actually it is only a single track road. And I think you've got other houses to the west of that site that will need to get in and out. There's a commercial car rallying site twice a week further down on there, as well as agricultural traffic. So I think I'd like to see the road widened to at least 6 metres in front of the site. It's owned by the same people, and that it's something that could be done. It's also, of course, a cycle path, and that's very important as well to us. So whether they want to put a cycle path in as well as the 6 metres, that's fine. But currently, it's certainly not up to standard and it's not sufficient.
Thank you. Okay, Daniel and
Sorry,
Simon.
sorry, Chairman, one other item. When we visited the site before the first committee meeting, we were astounded and horrified at the amount of dust and dirt and going towards the housing estate to the north of the site, over the railway. And I just would like to I heard in the presentation that it's still got a dirt surface in the yard, and I just wanted to make sure that there were mitigations against dirt and pollution from that site.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. Okay, so you've got three issues there. Would you like to deal with them, please?
Thank you, Chair. With regards to the Watt access onto the A12, we don't know. We would assume it would be as close to them as possible, but obviously until that's detrunked and they start looking at that, we don't know where they would prefer to put that access. We can probably put the wording in the informative to be as close to that business as possible, so less usage of the Old London Road, the better. I'm not sure about the widening of the 3.5 metre section of the Old London Road by that access. As Simon said, there is a section 106 for the Anderson site going to be, or a pot there that could be potentially used for some traffic calming measures or some improvements there. So I don't know if Simon could potentially elaborate on that. The dust and dirt, there is a condition on this, should it be approved tonight, with regards to them controlling the dust and dirt to protect the amenity of the neighbours. So that will be a requirement for them to do. Thank you.
Thank you. So are we able to steer towards what those mitigations should be, rather than just a blind, you are obligated to contain the dust?
It's a specifically worded condition about dampening down, just to prevent it escaping from the site. It's used widely across relevant planning permissions, and it can be enforced if that is not adhered to.
So just to clarify, that condition sets out the method, does it?
I will find it for you.
Councillor Davison, do you have anything you want to add, or are you just going over previous points?
Just clarifying the point about using Anderson's existing entrance, which would safeguard the existing housing further down the road.
Right, let's let Daniel answer the point about the method of containing the dust, and then we'll come back to your point, okay?
I will read it out. It's not hugely long. So prior to the first use of the development hereby permitted, control measures shall be installed in accordance with a scheme devised by a competent person for the control of dust that shall have been previously submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority. The control measures shall thereafter be retained and maintained to the agreed specification and working order. So it's up to them to submit a scheme to us and us to judge that acceptable and worthy of it.
Okay, thank you. And could you answer Councillor Davison's additional clarification point?
Sorry, I was looking for the condition. What was that? Sorry.
I was suggesting that they could use or exit onto the A12 at the Anderson site now, which would actually safeguard the housing and the cars further down towards Village Hall.
Okay, that's an existing access onto the A12. I mean, there are highway safety issues there. That is a very fast bit of road, and if the HGVs are coming off of a slow-moving Old London Road, there could be some issues with that. If that's an existing access, I assume that they are able to do that already, but choose not to. Again, presumably for the safety reasons, but if it's there already, they could use it.
Okay, Councillor Davison, does that satisfy your clarification?
The point is, I think National Highways aren't objecting, and we should be thankful that there is an existing. If it could be an advisory to suggest that they go back onto the A12 as soon as possible, rather than Old London Road, that would be very helpful.
Thank you. Could we add that to the informative? Yep, that's agreed. Okay. Right, there being no further speakers, I remind you that the recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions listed and the informatives that we have discussed this evening. Is there a proposer for that? Councillor Rippingale, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Sam McCarthy. We'll put it to the vote. Right, okay. All those in favour, please show.
That's 8, Chair.
All those against, please show.
That's 1.
Any abstentions, please show.
2. That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. That is carried. Thank you, members. We now move on to item 7.5, which is the King's Head, Colchester. Okay, thank you. Right. So I'll just find my notes on 7.5 and I will invite Philip Morton to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen. Thank you, Chair. Evening, everybody. Item 7.5 is a change of use application from a residential C3 dwelling to a C2 residential institution for the respite care of up to 2 young persons from 12 to 8 to allow for primary carers to take a break from their responsibilities for 2 to 3 days or more upon need. The application was called in by Councillor Kufalu due to concerns about amenity impacts, lack of detail on waste provision, including special waste. I'll just take you through some photos of the site. So this is a site plan, a red line site plan of the position of the site. This shows it within the surrounding context of the area. This shows the access from Serpentine Walk, onto the King's Head Court and from the opposite direction. And we have a view of the narrow entrance onto King's Head Court, then further down, working down the lane to the site itself with the parking and the garaging, and then a further view back towards the access. We go back. As per the committee report, it's considered that a site lies within a sustainable location and will be socially beneficial use of the building as a care facility for respite care for 2 young persons that would operate akin to a residential dwelling. It's considered that would be not a detrimental impact upon the neighbouring residential amenity, highway safety and parking by the proposed use. Subsequently, the application is held to be policy compliant with regard to relevant material planning considerations, and accordingly the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Philip. So could I invite Roy Buckland to speak in objection, and your 3 minutes will start when you press the red button. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. I'm representing all the residents of King's Head Court. I live there. We object to the application. It is a cul-de-sac leading to 5 bungalows accessed by a private single-track gravel driveway off Serpentine Walk. There are no passing places. It was only ever intended for domestic vehicles. Colchester City Council collect refuse and recycling in small vehicles because the normal trucks are too wide. Utilities, gas, electric, water are close to the surface and could easily be damaged by heavy traffic. The flat driving surface area is 7 feet 10 inches wide as the sides have heaped gravel. A vehicle such as a fire engine or ambulance would have difficulty in gaining access due to restricted width. A Scania fire engine would only have 2.5 inches of free width space. An ambulance would also have great difficulty. The issue could be compounded with cars parked in the driveway. The application refers to the property at the far end of the driveway. where there is a small turning area which must be kept clear at all times for residents, visitors and delivery vehicles to turn round in order to exit King's Head Court. Current visitors to the property have so far not kept the turning area clear. Increased traffic would cause increased pollution and potential danger for any visiting children which play in the area outside the other bungalows. Paragraph 14.4 of the planning report mentions 2 carers on site. However, the applicant's property management plan, dated 31st of October 2024, shows 3 carers when there are 2 occupants present. This will mean 3 vehicles. The plan also states that most support workers rely on public transport, but their own website shows that anyone applying for work as a care assistant with them will need to have access to their own transport. Paragraph 14.6 states that 2 parking places are acceptable for the proposed use, but at handover, 6 vehicles will be present. In addition, there will be regular management checks, maintenance, professional visitors and deliveries. Where will they park? Serpentine Walk has double yellow lines and adjacent roads are residents parking only. Commercial refuse from this business needs to be collected by large vehicles which cannot access the property due to narrow drive. We trust that you have taken note of the many objections raised in relation to the application, which demonstrate the strength of feeling locally and the lack of suitability of the premise for the proposed purpose. We respectfully request that this application be refused.
Thank you. So, could I ask the visiting councillor, Councillor Chifoglo, to come forward? And Kamal, you'll know that once you press the red button, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to start my speech with a question. In my call-in request, I requested a site visit. Could the Chair confirm that a site visit was arranged and all the committee members visited the area? While I appreciate the applicant's vision and mission to assist and support vulnerable children and their carers, I have concerns about the application, which included inconsistencies and responses, including the fact that applicant's plan does not incorporate areas to store and aid the collection of waste, and that no arrangements have been made for the separate storage and collection of recyclable waste. It also wrongfully claims that hours of opening are not relevant to this proposal and that the proposal in question does not involve the carrying out of industrial or commercial activities and processes, and it does not involve the use or storage of hazardous substances. The government's special guidance on healthcare waste is applicable to care homes, and it is clear that the applicant did not put measures in place to satisfy legal requirements. Applicant's plan does not include designated, secured, and protected areas for special waste storage. According to leading business waste companies, the main types of waste that care homes produce are pharmaceuticals, sanitary, clinical, textile, sharps, and dental. It must be highlighted that relevant legislation that applies to care home waste storage and disposal procedures is set out by a variety of acts, including the Environmental Protection Act 1990, Special Waste Regulation Act 1996, and the Control of Substances Hazardous to Health. Based on the management plan, one can assume that during shift handover, there will be 6 carers and a manager, and potentially parents who will pick up their kids with their personal vehicles. This means there will be at least 10 vehicles. The local plan policy DM15 on design and amenity is quite clear. Poor design will be refused, including that which fails to take the opportunity for good design or improving the local area. The policy highlights that ultimately, development proposals must demonstrate that they and any ancillary activities with them will provide, support, protect, promote, and incorporate several objectives. The wording used under DM15 is not should or ought, but rather must. This proposal is failing to uphold numerous strict requirements listed under DM15, including demonstrating that the proposal and any ancillary activities with it will provide legible streets and spaces while adequately integrating safe vehicle access. It also fails to acknowledge and have a waste management plan, let alone demonstrate that it will protect and promote public and residential amenities, particularly with regard to noise and disturbance and pollution, including odor pollution. This proposal also fails to provide a functional, robust, and adaptable design. Most importantly, it is failing to incorporate any necessary infrastructure and services, including utilities, recycling, and waste facilities, to meet current collection requirements and parking. Although this should be sensitively integrated to promote successful placemaking, applicant did not provide a pragmatic and comprehensive parking or waste management plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I've had a look at the paragraph that describes your calling, and I can't see where a site visit has been requested. However, I'll ask Philip Morton, the officer doing the report, as to whether, in his opinion, there's any information that can't be obtained from the photos provided or from the information within the report.
I believe the site is shown fully by the photographs provided.
And the information within the report would allow members to obtain enough information to be able to make a decision?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Chifoglo, for bringing that to our attention. My decision is that there is enough information provided as recommended by the planning officer, and therefore a site visit will not be granted, because the policy is to take site visits in exceptional circumstances. Thank you. So I now hang on, 7.5. Yep. I'll now ask members of the committee to ask any questions, and they can go on to debate the proposal. Councillor Gocha.
Thank you, Chair. Having listened to the speakers, a number of questions do come to mind. Firstly, can we clear up exactly how many vehicles are likely to be accessing this site on any given time? I do know the site. I don't need a site visit. I've walked down there quite a bit. It is a very narrow, gravelly passage. It's not even a proper road that leads to a group of bungalows. And there is a turning bit at the end, but it's not very big. So we've heard figures like 6 vehicles, 10 vehicles. My concern would be that if there is no parking provision additional to what is there already, then very narrow, gravelly thing will be jammed up, and there won't be possible turning, knowing it. So it's this issue of changeovers between staff and groups of vehicles being parked there at the same time with no extra provision that I think needs clarifying. How many vehicles are we talking about, and what possible conditions could we put in place to ensure that there's extra parking that isn't down there, that is somewhere else nearby, maybe. That's my big concern there. I'm also concerned about this issue of hazardous waste. If there is healthcare related waste, it does need special collection. So why isn't there any clear provision for how that will be collected? Would it need special large vehicles getting down that narrow gravelly thing to collect the hazardous waste? And is it possible that it can be conditioned that there's some place where it can be collected that isn't actually down King's Court, and it doesn't involve heavy vehicles going down there collecting waste? And do we need to put conditions in that there is special provision for hazardous healthcare waste? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. Councillor Rippingale.
I suppose I'm going to play devil's advocate here with Councillor Gocher. Is there any covenant on the property now, if it was residential, to limit the amount of cars that a resident could own and park there? I think we're looking at it from a commercial aspect, but if a resident moved in there and had 4 cars, what restrictions would we have on there? So I'm just playing devil's advocate there. Regardless of whether it's residential or it's commercial, you could end up with the amount of cars down there that you said you were stating. So that's something to consider, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Davison.
Yes, Chairman. Similar concerns. First of all, the 7-foot wide entrance on an unadopted road. This is a private road, and I'm concerned that, as Councillor Rippendale is saying, that this is a residential area, and there may well be covenants on each property for either road maintenance or traffic management. I do wonder, though, whether we ought to defer this until the applicant comes back with increased parking facilities, because actually it does say there's parking down the side of the bungalow, and they could easily extend the parking into the back garden and make it more usable for the extra traffic that will be using it. So I'm certainly not comfortable with the existing one.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. So could I ask the officers to respond to the questions and points made, please?
What questions would you like answered specifically? What questions are there specifically?
Thank you. There was the number of vehicles accessing the site by Councillor Gocher, what conditions to ensure nearby parking if necessary, and he talked about hazardous waste, and would there be special large vehicles needed to collect that waste, and therefore could it be conditioned that such vehicles have to collect the waste away from King's Court? Councillor Rippingale talked about is there a need for some kind of residence parking scheme, because you could end up with, say, a resident having 4 cars, which would then cause similar problems. And Councillor Davison is raising about the 7-foot wide entrance, and that this is an unadopted road. Residents would have to pick the cost up for maintenance, and increased parking facilities should be provided. And he presumably recommend a deferral. If you could answer those points, please.
The number of...
sorry, could you just hold on? Councillor Rippingale wants to clarify.
I wasn't stating that there should be a resident scheme. What I was saying is that we would have very little control if it was a residential property on how many cars that resident would have. So therefore, it's a similar, why is it difficult for a commercial premises? Unless there's a covenant on the property, given that it's a private road, that states how many vehicles can be parked there.
Thank you for that clarification. Sometimes it's difficult to pick up the nuances when you're trying to note down what people are saying in case you get asked what questions. So I understand Simon wants to come in first before I go to Philip.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, just really to respond to the point that Councillor Rippingale's made, specifically around almost the fallback position. I would remind members this is a 3-bedroom bungalow, 2 doubles, 1 single. It could be occupied as an HMO. It could be occupied by 5 adults, all with cars, potentially with visitors to that property. So please, members, have regard to the fact that, this property could potentially be occupied by 5 adults quite easily. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Philip, if you'd like to respond to the other questions.
The number of cars to the site, obviously we don't have numbers because we can't be certain. That would only ever be a maximum. The applicant has confirmed that most of the carers use public transport and intend to do so on North Station Road. Obviously that's the information we have, and that's what I have to go Obviously, there will be more cars at changeover, but it's the number of carers is on demand, and the number on the application is the upper limit. So it may be that there'll be much fewer carers needed, one per child perhaps, only one car in use. And that, as Simon said, is a C3 dwelling house, we have no control. And there could be up to 5+ cars at all times using the access as well.
Thank you. What about Councillor Goetsche's point about possible heavy goods vehicles collecting hazardous waste?
Hazardous waste collection is covered by other legislation, and it's not something that we can control. We can certainly condition them showing us a plan where they plan to store it safely, but
Yeah,
the collection of it, I'm not sure.
I think the question was the type of vehicles that may be
Well, I
used
mean,
down
we
a
couldn't
small-
control the type of vehicle.
You can't, and
No.
because the inference is it's down a small lane, which is privately owned, privately maintained. But you're saying we cannot condition that?
I do not believe so, no,
Okay.
unless Simon
Simon, you wish to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we could impose a condition seeking a scheme for the safe storage and disposal of waste of all types, and that could include the collection points to avoid those collecting having to come down the narrow driveway in large vehicles. So we could condition a scheme for the safe collection, storage and collection of waste, if members thought that would be appropriate. In addition, if members have got concerns, they could, of course, consider a temporary permission to allow the operation to be reviewed.
Thank you. So just thinking that one through about conditioning large vehicles coming down the lane, that would apply purely to this application. So where would the fairness be in if someone had a large Argos lorry delivering who are already resident? Where would the fairness be on the applicant?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the point is that hopefully people don't order from Argos every day, but the residents within this care unit would be having care facilities delivered every day. So there would be a difference in terms of the nature and frequency of those trips.
Thank you, and I should point out there are other outlets available. Right, so Councillor Arnold.
Yes, we can see the carport which the property has, which looks like it could contain 1 or 2 cars, but next to that is a double garage, and we're just curious. I'm just curious to know, is that part of the property or not?
Okay, thank you, and I have Councillor Tate.
Mine is less of a question and more of a sort of drawing things to a conclusion. But I think broadly, all of the concerns that have been raised, the site's already there. So, you know, the thing about fire engines not getting down, they can't get down now to the houses. So I think a lot of the objections raised are unfair. I think the only one that I would I'd also like to make sure was taken care of was that there is a suitable waste management plan. But again, I agree, it's not going to be HGVs coming down to collect waste.
Thank you. Councillor McLean.
Purely on the clinical waste, I think they would be, they would know what type of waste they will be collecting. There will be incontinence, they could be sharps, all the rest of it. So they will know what type of vehicle to use to make it accessible for them to go down this drive, because they would be doing it all the time. And I wouldn't think you'd need an Arctic to go down to a small bungalow.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Powling.
I agree with everything's been saying about the fact of vehicular access. The one that's really confusing me, if it's such a restricted access to this place, and it is really good to see that someone wants to put some respite for people, to allow respite for carers. But the people that could be going in there could be quite ill. which means they could need emergency vehicles. And if these vehicles are going to be street restricted because of parking anywhere, maybe the business model is wrong to actually put this sort of respite in an area that is very restricted for access. Because I'm a responder myself, and I know what it's like. If you can't get your emergency vehicle somewhere, it could cause problems. There seems to be quite a confusing aspect here on that. Why would you put this sort of business, even though it is vital, very good, why would you put it in an area where you could actually put in danger someone's life?
Thank you for that, Councillor Powling. I don't see any more speakers, so Philip, you could address the points raised.
Oh, yes. The double garage is split between the bottom two bungalows, so only the right-hand one is within the site, but it's not policy compliant for parking, so it wasn't part of the policy. And the side is possibly room for 2 cars, but 1 comfortably. I don't know any, there weren't really.
Thank you. Yeah, just on Councillor Powling's point, I know the vehicular access has been talked, but he's raising the question, why would you put such a business there where there are obvious gaps? But just for, you know, transparency, see that questions are asked, if you'd be kind enough to respond.
I don't know, the applicant chose to put the business there, so it's on them. And obviously, as a C3 use, it still need access for emergency services as well. So it's not that it's going to be any different from the C3 current use.
Thank you. Simon, you wish to come in?
Only, Chair, to point out to members, I'm sure they'll be aware of the fact that bungalows tend to be occupied by very elderly people with high care needs anyway. So, you know, this bungalow could well be occupied by an elderly couple with frequent visits from care workers or other blue light services, and potentially this could actually generate a lower use from such a scenario. So it is what it is, and the application in this location. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now, having heard the answers to your questions and the could I ask Councillor Davison whether you still wish to propose a deferral?
I think, having heard the views of the committee, the only thing I'd like to pick up on is perhaps as Mr Cairns' suggestion that we perhaps give it a 2-year temporary permission to see whether it's feasible for not only the operator but also the residents nearby. Bearing in mind these are 12 to 18-year-olds, and as Mr Cairns has pointed out, all the others are retired.
Thank you for that. Councillor McLean, do you wish to speak to that particular point?
I would like to support it if it's on the table, because I think we are crying out for help like this, and we do not have enough of it. There's a lot of despair out there for youngsters and needing help.
Okay, thank you. So is there a general consensus that that should be an added condition? Can I see you nodding? Yes, I can see nods. Okay, so Philip, are you willing to allow that as a condition?
Yeah, if the committee is minded to.
Thank
yes.
you. Okay, so with that condition and the others listed in the report, do I have a proposer to approve?
Chair,
Councillor,
could I just clarify whether that includes the suggested condition on the scheme for the safe storage and collection of waste?
I'm seeing nods. Philip, yeah, okay, right. So with that clarification, Councillor Tate is proposing. Is there a seconder? Councillor McLean. All those show in favour.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so we move to 7.7, which is 132 High Street. And could I ask Lucy Munden to present, please?
Thank you,
Chair. Good evening, members. Yes, this application seeks a change of use of an existing or a previous dry cleaners into a restaurant and takeaway use, which includes the installation of an extraction flue. Just to note that the description of development has changed from the committee report, and this is referred to in your amendment sheet. It's primarily because the original description referred to the flue being to the rear of the building, but it's now been relocated and the description has been amended accordingly. One other point to note is that the change of use from a dry cleaners to a restaurant would not ordinarily require planning permission because they fall under the same use class, but by virtue of the takeaway use and the flue system, that's why an application is before you this evening. The application site is outlined here in red. It's located not very far from where we're sitting this evening. As you can see, the town hall to the west of the plan. It fronts onto the High Street in Colchester city centre. Immediately to the east is a large nightclub building, and immediately to the west is a recently converted cafe use with residential above. To the rear of the property is Angel's Courtyard, which is a residential development. It's quite a wide part of the High Street here, a variety of different retail and leisure uses. Immediately to the front of the site is some cycle stands and also bus shelters, which you'll see in a moment. As referred to in the committee report, the site is located within conservation area, and listed buildings are also referred to. So this plan just indicates those listed buildings shaded in blue for information. The application site is located where I'm indicating here. So this is a photograph of the property in question. It's boarded up, some works are ongoing, and you can see it's in need of repair. Access to the rear of the property is through this doorway where I'm indicating here, just left to the shop front. There's an alleyway that leads to the back of the building at that point. A wider shot of the High Street here. Again, you can see the boarded up property. Immediately to its right is the large nightclub building that I mentioned. You can see it's much more ornate in its architecture, and it's a much taller building as well. And then the converted cafe use is located immediately to the left of the property. You can also see the cycle stands in front and also the bus shelters. And then this is just looking to the west towards the town hall, which you can see in the background. Access to Angel's Courtyard is through in between the blue and white building that you can see in the photograph. So as mentioned, the application has been revised. It was initially proposed for there to be a flue to the rear of the property that was utilising an existing flue that served the dry cleaners. But as a result of neighbouring concerns and also concerns of the council's environmental protection team, that has now been revised. So the extraction flue comes up through the centre of the building. So hopefully you can see that on these plans. This is the ground floor. Is coming through the first floor where I'm indicating with the pointer, and then to the second floor, and then it runs along the building towards the High Street frontage and terminates through the roof. At that point, I can just indicate on the roof plan where the flue will terminate through the roof. So the application is recommended for approval subject to a number of conditions, and these are primarily in the interests of neighbouring amenity. They're set out in full in the committee report, but I've just summarised them here. So there's hours of demolition and construction, hours of operation, waste disposal, self-closing external doors, noise and vibration mitigation, refuse and recycling storage, and the control of fumes, smells and odours. And it's on this basis, as well as the considerations set out in the committee report, that the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, could I ask our visiting councillor, Councillor Gocher, to come forward? And you have 5 minutes once you press the red button.
Thank you, Chair. I called this application in because of concerns expressed mainly by residents of Angel Court about the impact of the change of use and so forth. The residents welcome the revised proposal for where the flue goes, and that was welcome. But they still have certain concerns. So I'm just wondering if these are fully covered by any conditions. It looks like one of them is. But there was a concern about the fact that there is a ground floor rear door, well, side door, and that the residents are very worried about the fact that where the waste storage may well be near that door is only separated from 3 flats by a flimsy fence. So they're worried obviously about smells from the waste. It's been told to me that the rear door is often left open by workmen at the moment, and there's a lot of noise emanates from that rear door. But I'm not sure what we can do in terms of conditioning on that one. Well, I mean, I'm guessing we can't condition that they close their doors, but it'd be nice. But I'll welcome any advice on that. And there was a lot of concern about this front door that leads onto the high street, and they be taking rubbish out at the end of the day because it could be open till 1 p.m. I believe that's just been addressed in one of the existing conditions. But again, if you could just clarify this. Is it the case that they can't take rubbish out at the end of the day, stretching right up to 1 p.m, and that there's a cut-off point there? Because that was particularly bothering the residents, because there's apparently a 90-year-old who lives nearby who will be kept, or could be kept awake by toing and froing at 1 a.m. in the morning, removing rubbish at the end of the day. So that was a big concern there. I think that the concerns that still exist amongst residents of Angel Court revolve around noise, especially in that late night time, and B, this side door area being used to store waste and possible smells that might emanate from that. And I'm just wondering what conditions we have in place or could put in place to mitigate those issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, could I ask Lucy and Simon to respond to the comments from the visiting councillor?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, there is a side door existing. I imagine it possibly has been left open quite frequently because there are existing works going on. That being said, if the application is approved for the change of use, there is the condition that's recommended for self-closing doors, so that the door is not left open inadvertently. In terms of waste storage, I have discussed the matter verbally with the applicant, and their intention is to primarily have waste storage within the building. There's an area on the ground floor, and that their intention would be then to dispose of waste to an external bin the following day and not late at night. So I would think if residents are still concerned about how the waste would be managed, to possibly amend the recommended condition that is asking for details of storage and refuse storage and recycling facilities, and to include a waste management plan in that as well, so there's comfort as to how that would be managed. Hopefully that's dealt with points raised by Councillor Gocher, but happy to answer any more questions.
Okay, so there's nothing else wish to add. Okay, thank you. So we'll now open it up to the committee, and I have Councillor Rippingale.
I too had been made aware of issues for the residents of Angel Court, and I remember when we had the other application in front of us that there were concerns about the flue and the noise. Looking at the 2 other businesses that front onto that bit, both close at 11. Why have they been granted till 1 in the morning? I would advise that we condition that they keep in line with the other 2 businesses who both close at 11. I suspect it's because they're next to a nightclub and sell pizza, and people will have the munchies at 1 o'clock in the morning. However, there are people who live above there or very closer than the Hippodrome. See, I'm showing my age now because I don't know what it's actually called now. And I think I don't know what the conditions are on the other two businesses, how late they are allowed to open, but I would suggest that if we have conditioned those two for 11, that we do the same with this premises.
Thank you. Councillor Spindler.
Hiya, yes, the only thing I was going to say is, yes, it's a very lively area at 1 o'clock, and if it was to be open till later hours, maybe they should consider security like they have in McDonald's and everywhere else.
Thank you. Okay. I don't see any other hands up, so I will ask Lucy to respond to those points.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application was proposed for opening hours until 1 a.m. We've consulted with our environmental protection colleagues and they haven't objected on that basis. As you say, it may be because the adjacent use of the nightclub is a later opening time. Although there would not be any external space associated with this other than the alleyway where there's the waste storage that would be conditioned. So activities would be on the high street side in terms of comings and goings. So all I can say is that it's been considered by environmental protection. They have no objections to 1 a.m. Of course, members may want to give further consideration to that point. I believe the next door cafe is till 11 p.m, as you said. In terms of security arrangements, it could very well be appropriate if members consider it so that there could be a condition requiring details of security arrangements if there was a concern about that aspect as well. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Rippingale, having heard the view of the environmental health, would you still like to see a condition of 11 as opposed to 1?
Yeah, I think we have to be mindful that the other two businesses have an 11 p.m. closing time and that there are residents there. And primarily that had been a dry cleaners that wouldn't have been open, one would hope, at 11, 12 o'clock at night. So I think they're aware of the nightclub, the residents, that's been there for many years, but the dry cleaners had also been there for many years. So I think we should condition, I think 1 a.m. is too late.
Right, Councillor McCarthy.
It's just to back your point, and equally, the nightclub's only open 2-3 nights a week. This is conditioned at the moment for 7 nights a week at 1 o'clock, so I would support 11 o'clock.
Okay, other members of the committee, do you have any views on supporting a restrictive opening time? The only thing I'm thinking of is the type of business it is. And if you look at similar takeaway businesses on St Boltops, what time are they open until? Councillor Tate.
Yeah, I'm thinking when Councillor Rippingale was in the Hippodrome, I was probably in the Chippy a couple of doors up. It was particularly good back then. And so I'm not so much the two right next door, but I know further down the high street there are other places, and I think we perhaps need to try and have some kind of fairness. And yeah, I don't know how we'd do it, but yeah, it would need to be consistent, I think, because if others are open to 1, it then doesn't feel particularly fair saying this one can't and so forth. But
thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, Councillor Powling.
Can I, what sort of food is this restaurant actually, is it a sitting restaurant or is it a fast food? What is it actually selling is question 1. And secondly, with the food, if they are having excess food, how are they going to seal it? Will it have to be put into lock? I know you said it might be internally, but will the storage be sealed? The only other thing going back, once again, there's a nightclub next to this. We're worried about noise. There's a nightclub there. 3 nights a week, but I also agree with Councillor Tate. We should be fair of all businesses, things. It's hard for any business around here now. We don't want to start putting more restrictions that affect our high streets even more. That's a point there. I see exactly what councillors are saying, but we want to try and encourage businesses and put life into our high streets back.
Thank you. So I'll ask Lucy if you could answer the point about will the storage be sealed? Sorry, Sam. Councillor McLean, I am sorry. You need to come in first. Sorry, Lucy.
I mean, if it's not serving alcohol, is it? And it's not playing music. I don't see what the problem is if it opens up till 1 in the morning. How much noise does a pizza place make?
Okay. Thank you. Lucy, if you could answer the point about whether the waste container is sealed.
So just to confirm, it is a pizza restaurant and takeaway. So in that respect, the amount of waste is quite different to if it was another sort of restaurant, I would imagine, or so I've been told. So the waste, we'll have a condition to stipulate and secure the type of waste storage, recycling and waste. Externally, it would, I've been advised it would be a council external bin for business waste. In terms of the opening hours, if members were particularly concerned, there could possibly be an opportunity to condition the 1 AM opening perhaps on Fridays and Saturdays, but 11 PM for the remainder of the week, if that was felt appropriate. I hope that's answered the questions.
Yeah, Councillor Powling, does that answer your points?
I actually agree with Councillor McLean because if it stays open late, the business is going to be when the actual nightclub is open anyway. The rest of the night mostly wouldn't be. So if you're going to restrict the timing, I'd agree with that.
Sorry, can you clarify if you're going to restrict the timing? So
I'm happy, like Sam, to leave it to the 1 AM because I think naturally the timings will work alongside the actual nightclub anyway. But if the members do want to put restrictive on it, to allow it to stay sort of in time with the nightclub Fridays and Saturday nights, etc.
Okay, there seems to be some disagreement amongst members about what should happen. Have you anything to add to that, Councillor McLean? I can see you looking anxious to want to speak.
Well, I mean, I'd keep it open 1 AM every day of the week, or that it wants to open, and I'm willing to propose that we accept it.
Yeah, Councillor Rippingale was moving towards wanting an earlier closing time. So
right.
if it's okay with you, in fairness, we'll put...
I'll let the committee know that I will vote. I'll probably vote against that, so that...
He's the first.
Yeah, okay, I'm being advised by the clerk that you were the one who actually made the proposal first. So therefore, we will put your proposal to the vote, which is for a 1 AM closing and no restrictions for an earlier time. Does that meet what you're suggesting?
Correct.
Right. Is there a seconder? Councillor Powling. Okay. All those in favour of Councillor McLean, I've just asked Richard to clarify what it is that you're voting on.
Chair, you are voting on a proposal that we accept the recommendation, which includes the opening times as set out in the report, which is a 1 o'clock closure. Could we also clarify whether you want to go with the other condition that was suggested, which was around including a waste management plan in the refuse?
Right, so I was looking for an indicative suggestion before going for the recommended approval. So just to clear up whether members are happy with the 1 AM first, but you seem to be suggesting that we move to approve the proposal and decide what conditions.
That's as it is.
Well, my understanding is that that is what Councillor Nicholene is proposing, is that we accept the officer recommendation.
Right, is that what you're proposing? We accept the officer recommendation?
Yes.
Thank you for that clarification. So we need to then find out whether there's consensus to put the additional condition in, which is?
It was proposed, Chair, or suggested, should I say, that there be an additional condition around a waste management plan.
Right. Are you happy to incorporate that, Councillor McLean?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Now I can now see Councillor Powling looking anxious. Do you wish to speak?
I'm happy to second that with the waste management plan.
Okay, thank you. So we have a proposal and seconder to approve the report in front of you as it is, which is 1 AM closure, along with an additional proposal of which Richard has just outlined. All those in favour?
Seven.
All those against?
2.
Any abstentions?
1.
So that's carried.
That's carried, Chair.
Thank you. Right, it is now 25 to 8. We'll have a 10-minute break and then we will come back and finish off the rest of the business. Right, welcome back, and we will continue our business. So we are going to move on to item 2. Item 2, which is land north of Factory Hill and east of Honey Lane, Tiptree. And can I invite John Miles to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Thank you. So as outlined, item 7.2, land north of Factory Hill, east of Honey Lane. The application concerns remedial works and hard and soft landscaping pursuant to the provision of the wider development's public open space and allotments. The application is before members as it has been called in by Councillor Dundas. Amendments are as per the amendment sheet with one addition, namely we've received an updated ecology walkover report and biodiversity plan. The updates to the reports make no changes to the actual substance of the proposals, but look to ensure consistency between the aforementioned reports and the most recent landscaping plans submitted in August. B&G is still comfortably in excess of 10%, and there's considered to be no wider material change to the conclusions in the committee report with regards to ecology. Condition 9 is, however, recommended to be updated to reference the latest documents, specifically revision C rather than revision B. It's the location plan, application site red, wider development over to the west, which is being built out. An aerial image of the site for some further context, application site on the right, jam factory seen on the left, and the residential development to the north at the top. Under the original consents for the Crest Nicholson development and within the associated legal agreements, the area of land that forms the application site is specified as an area of public open space and allotments, as seen here on an excerpt from the Section 106 agreement in 2017. This is the detailed proposals, which shows the general arrangement plan. The scheme includes changes to the existing ground levels with a view to overcome existing level issues on site and facilitate the provision of the public open space and also the allotments in a usable and visually acceptable fashion. The application has also been submitted by the applicant as a possible alternative remedy to an enforcement notice, which has been served with regards to the unauthorised engineering operations on site, and it is these engineering operations which have resulted in the current site levels, which this application now looks to remedy. As the application has been submitted in the context of being a possible remedy to the existing issues, the recommended conditions include a requirement that remedial groundworks and landscaping will need to be undertaken within 6 months of the permission date to ensure the works, if approved, are carried out in a timely manner and support the delivery of the community facilities. It's just an enlarged view of part of the site, shows the indicative area of the public open space, which is carried from the Section 106 agreement. The play equipment itself is to be delivered by Tiptree Parish Council to their specifications, and this plan also shows some of the soft landscaping. And this is just a view to the north of the allotments. And the plan also includes details for the laying out of the allotments, which includes bound hog-in path running down the middle of the plots, surfacing of the allotment parking area, and a 1.8 metre high green chain link fence to secure the allotments. It's the level strategy, and while there are still some noticeable change in levels across the site, the application delivers a scheme which is considered to accommodate the changes in levels in a smoother and more natural manner, avoiding an overly engineered appearance. And the steepest changes in levels are now between the main public open space and the allotments, but these changes in levels do not exceed 15 degrees, so approximately 1 in 7, and that's in accordance with the Council's landscape guidance. There's also the provision of a maintenance strip to the side of the allotments on request of Tiptree Parish Council, and the level of the allotments is shallower, approximately 1 in 25, which is around 4 degrees. These are just some enlarged views. This is an existing topography showing the concentration of higher lands to the northwest corner of the site and other changes in levels across the site. This shows the proposed topography, including the reduced gradients mentioned. Some sections, I appreciate some of the finer details will probably be a bit hard to see, but it's slightly easier to refer to the previous level plans shown, which show the same levels information and also includes the information on the gradients. And now we've quickly through some site photos. This is looking over the allotment area, the view of the existing levels, a view of the allotments from the other side of the fence. It's a view looking up west towards the residential properties from where the allotments are proposed. This is a longer view from the bottom of the site looking up. a view looking northeast towards the proposed allotment area with some of the public open space visible. And these are some other views taken from a similar position, looking at different angles. Again, that's towards the allotments, towards the properties, across the remainder of the open space. The footpath, which runs along the northwest of public open space, a view further along it. Just some final views over the application site. Do a very quick summary. The main considerations in the case are considered to be visual amenity, landscape, contamination, flood risk and drainage. With regards to visual amenity and landscaping, officers are satisfied with the levels as proposed. It's considered the scheme in terms of levels, hard and soft landscaping would deliver usable and maintainable amenity provisions to the benefit of the local community without harm to visual amenity. Contamination is considered to be suitably covered by the submitted report and the conditions recommended, and there's considered to be no risk to human health from any contaminants. The Council's Contaminated Land Officer is also satisfied. Similarly, SUDS have reviewed the latest iteration of the scheme, including both the proposed levels and the drainage strategy, and they're satisfied with the contents subject to conditions. It's also noted that the scheme as revised has attracted no objections from statutory consultees or Tiptree Parish Council. Taking into account this, the development is considered acceptable with regards to wider material planning considerations for the reasons outlined in the officer report. The recommendation to members is subsequently one of approval, as set out within the committee report and subject to the outline amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. And could I invite Chris Fry, who will join us via Zoom, to speak for 3 minutes. And when you begin speaking, the committee clerk will start counting your time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. My name is Chris Fry. I'm the planning manager for Crest Nicholson Easton, and I wish to thank the Chairman and members of the committee tonight for allowing me to speak on behalf of the application John has just presented to you. As stated in paragraph 15.9 of the Office Report, the previous application for landscape works at our Tiptree site was dismissed, namely on the creation of a bund, which is now omitted from the scheme that's been presented before you. With the slopes being relatively gentle to create the allotment space, as I'll mention a little later, it is considered we've addressed the landscape characteristics of refusal of the previous scheme. The landscape specification details on drawing P08 detail proposed wildflower seeds, tree, bulb planting, hedges and retention of existing grassland, alongside hard landscape works and boundary treatments to serve the allotments in accordance with the dialogue with the Parish Council. We have met the Parish Council on 3 occasions during the year to discuss the various options available to provide the allotments and maintain the open space. Whilst it would have resulted in less earthworks, it is by virtue of the Parish Council's maintenance equipment, there's a need to reduce the current slope of the bank, which is to the west of the allotments, separating the open space from the allotments from a 1 in 3 to a 1 in 7 slope that John has just described to you. Also, in order to allow a tractor and any service vehicles, the Parish Council require a 5 metre wide service margin, which is added to the north and west side of the allotments. And this runs on the base of the bank. A 3 metre wide access route to the service margin is added across the sloping area to the south of the open space, thus creating a connection from the open space to the allotments. A 2 metre wide service margin is provided to the eastern boundary. Turning to contamination, whilst Crest maintain there is no alien soil, which has been reported by a third-party objector, as demonstrated in the contamination report and trial testing, no such alien soil exists. It is considered that with the building debris that you've seen on John's photograph, it would be reasonable for the conditions imposed by your environment officer to be carried forward. Flooding. First and foremost, the site is in flood zone 1 and slopes away from the residential properties and is referred to in officer report at paragraph 15.23 and 15.25. Crest will alleviate and help address any localised surface water ponding by tilling and or aerating any hard or compacted area of the scheme. This is addressed in condition 10 as recommended by officer, the same sentiment as condition 3 recommended by the LLFA. Ecology walkovers and biodiversity management plan have been submitted with an application that shows more than 10% D&G in accordance with your policy END1 of your local plan. The conditions as proposed by the case are achievable, as groundwork contractors have confirmed that when assessing the scheme, the works required can be delivered within the 6 month time frame, as stipulated by condition. A drafting of a legal agreement is well in the way. This ensures delivery of the open space in line with the court's original consent. And this has been shared with the case officer. This ensures the scheme is linked to that original planning permission, as I just referred to. In conclusion, the application has sought to address the previous reasons for refusing in dialogue with your case officers, the parish and the statutory consultees. There are no outstanding issues that haven't been addressed or controlled by way of condition. And I therefore respectfully request that the committee seek to resolve the application in accordance with your officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And now can I invite Visiting Councillor Dundas to come forward to speak? And Paul, you have 5 minutes when you press the red button.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, committee members. The history of this and planning on it is a long one. I can't go through all the history in 5 minutes, but it is something of a tale of woe the developer, and to a degree this council, should be quite embarrassed by. The original planning actually dates back to 2013, nearly 12 years ago, yet here we all are still talking about it. Under the original plans, once the adjoining development by Crest Nicholson was completed, the public open space was to be landscaped with drainage so that it would not flood and to provide a high quality amenity area. There was to be a play park installed and around 30 new allotments. The landscape land, the play area and allotments would then be handed to Tiptree Parish Council under a Section 106 agreement and made available to Tiptree residents. However, here we are nearly in 2025, some years now after the completion of the development, and the residents are looking out on a muddy field surrounded by Harris fencing. There is no play park. The allotments are an unsightly pile of rubble, also surrounded by temporary fencing. The land is all clay and floods with floodwater spilling towards the houses. I think some of you have been sent pictures. Children do not have their play park, and residents who have had their names down for an allotment for 10 years still have no sign of them arriving. This is something the developers should be frankly ashamed of. They have treated their customers and community appallingly. This council, as the effective guarantor that things will actually be done in accordance with planning permission issued, also has to question whether it dropped the ball. The developer not only failed to complete the site in accordance with the planning permission, but they were also accused of importing unconsented material from other sites, dumping it, in other words, onto the public open space. This raised the levels above the original natural ones, which has increased the flooding issues. The council thought the evidence strong enough to begin enforcement action for this. The enforcement action brought by us, the council, against the developer for failure to carry out the works in accordance with the original permission and the importation of unconsented fill material to this site reached the point of a court date in 2023. It was only at the hypothetical doors to the courtroom that the developer offered to come up with a solution, which after many delays and revisions is the application you see before you tonight. You will also note some of the significant number of comments and objections on the planning portal. But when reviewing this application, I would ask members to concentrate on some key areas. Firstly, you need to satisfy yourselves that you are not approving a long-term flood risk. There's been much confusing correspondence with SUDS, including reference to the wrong documents and consent given and withdrawn. I refer to an email in April this year from SUDS, which is on the planning portal, which says, "I wish to withdraw my consent letter of the 13th of March, which was in error. In my previous rejection letter, I noted the unconsented importation of fill material. The mounding this material impacts the runoff direction and flow of water on the site." And further says, even if the imported material were to remain, the applicant should demonstrate no flooding would occur on or off-site up to a 1 in 30 year rainfall event. So you need to be confident that the application before you does remove sufficient unconsented fill material and does demonstrate no flooding would occur in a 1 in 30 year event. There is a gradient plan, but where is the drainage plan, which was in the original granted permission? If you are not confident, I ask you to condition a proper drainage plan. Secondly, you need to be assured the remaining soil is suitable for use, particularly on the allotments which are currently covered in rubble. Topsoil is all very well, but it needs to be deep enough to be a practical use on an allotment. It is no good if you dig down 30 centimetres and hit rubble, as you do in the garden. We cannot have useless allotments delivered, so I would ask you to condition that the soil is fit for purpose specifically for allotment use. Thirdly, I believe there has been recent correspondence from the Parish Council regarding the road up the middle of the allotments. There is currently a concrete road there which TPC wish to see removed and replaced with a hogging type on the original plans. Please assure yourself this will happen. Finally, there is the key matter of timescale. This has been a mess. There is no other way to describe it. I'm afraid it is difficult to argue the applicant has acted in good faith so far. We cannot have this dragging on any longer. As members of this council, we should be embarrassed about it. I note the 6 months commitment, but we need to be absolutely resolved. We will enforce that. I'd also remind you with regard to the allotments, timing is critical to avoid missing each growing season. Allotments delivered in August won't be a practical use until the next year. Residents have waited long enough. So finally, it needs to be done, but it needs to be done properly. It needs not to flood, it needs to be of high quality, and it needs to be done in an acceptable timescale. Please use your powers to make sure that's the case. Thank you.
Well done, Councillor Dundas. Almost to time, thank you. Right, okay, so John and Simon, can you comment on the points raised in the Have Your Say speakers?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, I think they can be sort of whittled down to three main categories. So the suds and drainage, the contamination and the timeframes in terms of implementation. So with regard to drainage flood risk, the site is in flood zone 1. So it's at low risk of flooding. Appreciate the main consideration in this case though is drainage. As the site would remain greenfield, the implementation of a formal drainage system is not necessarily considered appropriate, and SUDS have agreed to the SUDS approach proposed by the applicant. So they have a drainage strategy which is indexed, which has been considered by SUDS, and SUDS have confirmed that they have no objection subject to conditions. So the drainage plan is primarily relying on that natural drainage, and SUDS are ultimately satisfied with the information that the applicant has put forward. As we said, there would also be aeration and tilling works secured by condition with a view to improving soil permeability where possible. I think that hopefully covers that point. In terms of contamination, there is a raft of contamination conditions recommended to be included on any approval should the application be approved. Those have been drafted in consultation with the Council's Contaminated Land Officer, and they include details of remediation to ensure that the site is brought to an acceptable condition for the intended use, so namely the allotments, and that also includes explicit reference to the removal of building debris, which I think is the most identified issue in terms of the soil condition. Otherwise, the soil has been found to be free of any risk to human health from contaminants. Yep, as outlined, the conditions require a 6-month timeframe for remedial works, so that includes explicitly the changes in levels proposed, the removal of excess soil, spoil and debris generated from those operations, and the provision of the hard and soft landscaping. So those conditions are considered to be very precise and enforceable, so hopefully that will provide members some security that we do have recourse should they not be complied with. Hopefully that covered everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon, you wish to add anything? No? Okay, right. So we will invite members to speak, and I have Councillor Spindler first.
I don't know the details of the drainage, and thank you for what you did give. But I was just wondering whether could have been an underground drainage that goes to the Tiptree Reservoir, or possibly a ditch of some sort, or a pretty ditch, that could be put along going towards the Tiptree Reservoir, because clay, it does sit on clay, doesn't it, water? So just, I mean, like I said, I don't know what the fine details are, the drainage is, but whether there was something like that put in place.
Thank you. And Councillor Powling.
I think it's very valid points put out by Councillor Dundas, that can we have assurances that the conditions will be fit for these allotments. I'd personally like to see that the allotments themselves, they talk about 300 mil. I think that contamination should be going down to at least 600 mil, as if like in agricultural land, I think when you go down about, is it 600 mil, is it, when you do your land drainage?
Under drainage. Yeah.
Under drain. So I believe, because it might not be dangerous to human health, but you don't want to keep sticking your fork into a brick. And I know what developers can do under soil. It looks good until you try and dig it. But you also stated the fact that they should have had play equipment. So what's happened to that on that particular site? Is the parish council going to be given a lump of sum to choose themselves? But I'd agree with Councillor Dundas, as long as the conditions are met within the time frame and soil quality and reasonable drainage, we don't want to see issues of water, especially clay soil, that the water suddenly floods back into the houses. That's my questions there.
Thank you. And councillor Tate.
Yes, just a query really. Does that soil permeability where possible? I don't begin to know what soil permeability means. But who decides what is possible? If they said, oh, it's not possible, do you know what I mean? Who is it, us that decides the levels or them?
Thank you. And councillor Davison.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, quite a concern that this has been dragging on for 11 or 12 years. And quite rightly, the developers should be ashamed of themselves. Having said that, we've now got a way forward. There's no mention from the officer about the concrete road that goes through the middle of the site. I just wonder, if it is such a good concrete road, why aren't we using that for access to the allotments rather than putting a new track down the side? I agree with the drainage. You know, under drainage wouldn't cost that much. Wouldn't cost the developer that much. And then at least then we're assured that no flooding. But likewise, how close is the nearest playground? That's what I want to know. You know, you've got a whole new estate and no facilities. And to have a wildflower meadow might be fine, but actually that doesn't actually occupy the children for long. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm no other speakers, so we have a number of questions there. If you would like to address them, John, and Simon, come in where you feel you need to.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, starting at drainage, as outlined in the officer report, we certainly shied away from the fact that the soil is quite heavy clay content, and it isn't doesn't sort of really naturally aid drainage. That is the natural geology. It's considered of the soil. That simply is what it is. If we were looking at a more formal drainage strategy to be provided, I know concerns have been raised that it's not considered to be suitable outfall, given the location, the sort of angles of the land and sort of where that would then discharge. And I think that would be a bigger body of work, and there would also then be an associated maintenance responsibility with that, which ultimately then would fall to the parish council, because they are the people who would be taking over control of the land. So I think there's a balance to consider there. In terms of the existing situation, again, officers recognise that there has been occurrences of some standing water on there. I'm not sure about the frequency of that, but there certainly is not considered to be any risk to human health or property, or there's such an issue in that regard that it would sort of unduly hinder the usability of that space. So officers are satisfied with the drainage strategy that has been put forward, as are SUDS in their role as statutory consultees. In terms of the words of permeability and the aeration and tilling, effectively it's just looking to put more air in the soil so the water can drain a bit more easily. So yeah, in terms of the play area will be provided ultimately by Tiptree Parish Council to their specifications. The reason that it hasn't yet been provided is because these precursory works, which are the responsibility of the developer, haven't been undertaken, and understandably the Parish Council aren't and don't want to adopt the land until it's ready for them to go and put these facilities on. So that's also why there's been that engagement with the Parish Council to check that they're happy that this is a workable solution, and if and when the land is transferred, it'll be then the Parish Council providing that play equipment, and there is a commuted sum in the legal agreement of 130,000 from the developer towards the Parish Council, which should help towards that and the subsequent maintenance. I think the last point was the concrete road. I think it's wider than the sort of hogging path is proposed, and our preference, and I think SUD's preference certainly, is to look to have as many permeable surfaces as possible. So my understanding is that that's why there's a different form of surfacing there, and it's considered that the removal and any work of that concrete road, the building material below that 300 mil, would all be covered by the contamination condition. So that requires specifically the removal of, say, building debris, because we appreciate you don't just need sort of clean soil, it needs to be soil that isn't full of debris as well. So officers consider that is suitably covered. Thank you.
Thank you. So what about the question about the depth of the soil for the allotments being 600 rather than 300?
I mean, yeah, that's if that's something that sort of members feel strongly about. My understanding is that the 300 mil is sort of the industry standard, if you like, for the establishment there. The soil beneath it will have to be in a suitable condition, and there has been the contamination testing done. So it's not a case that 300 mil is a barrier to something unsuitable below. It's to complement that, and it's to sort of assist in that regard. But I'm happy to take direction from members if they have strong feelings in that regard.
Okay, councillor Powing, you raised it. What's your view?
I would say whether the actual allotment area itself, rather than rows, it should be a lot deeper than 300 mil. If you are a proper gardener, they sometimes double dig, which would mean they'd be going down possibly at least 500 mil. So, and it is frustrating. I've seen it where developers, they've put this lovely topsoil on, apparently, and it literally is not thick enough at all and causes problems.
Okay, so are you recommending to the rest of the committee a 600mm depth on the allotment area?
600mm, Chair.
Any views on that from other members? Sorry? Councillor Davison, do you wish to express a view?
Well, just informative, really, to say that land drainage would only cost something like £3,000 to £4,000 a hectare, and actually, that would go in at 700 to 800 mil depth deep, and it would then take the bulk of the rainwater and any surplus water in the clay. Clay will hold more water, but it does have to go somewhere. And why aren't we putting a drainage plan in that actually goes down to the bottom corner, and you could have a nice pond and nature area?
Right, so you're raising this in addition to what councillor Powling is saying?
Well, forgive me, councillor Dundas asked for a drainage plan, and I'm just suggesting that any farmer would put a plan over the whole field, and that would drain into a suds area, a pond.
Okay, so I'm just trying to clarify, that's separate to councillor Powling's point of a deeper surface level on the allotments, or is it, or are you saying the whole area should be down to the depth of a drainage?
It would make it more usable for the village. And of course, we don't know where the playground's going either at the moment.
Sorry, so I'm just trying to understand you properly. You're saying across the whole area a depth deep enough to put under drainage in, which is...
Yes, you only, forgive me, you only do it probably every 20 metres or so. It's not the whole area, but it takes the bulk of the rain when there's a surplus.
Right, and how would that accommodate councillor Powling's wish for 600 over the allotments?
So that could be linked into this drainage plan for the whole area. Going down to the lowest point where you'd have the suds area, which would take any flood area.
Okay, John, would you like to come back on that suggestion, and have you, are you happy that it has been explained enough for you to be able to respond?
Yes, thank you. Happy to respond. Shall I come back on the drainage first, Chair? Would that be easy?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay. So, as I said, it's a bit of a balance ultimately. The scheme that we have before us does have a drainage strategy, albeit that what it is relying on is the levels of the site to naturally take that water away from the path and the other sort of areas across the site. I can't confirm 100%. My recollection and my review of the previous drawings, I don't recall there being any significant drainage plan or anything approved under the original consent. That's of course not to say that's something we can't consider, but I think in terms of proportionality and thinking about the management responsibilities, again, this would fall to Tiptree Parish Council to maintain. I can't say sort of how difficult that would be, but my understanding is with regards to swales and other suds features specifically, if I recall correctly, Tiptree Parish Council did have reservations about that because of the maintenance and the responsibilities that would come with it. And as I say, the drainage strategy that has been submitted, SUDS in their role as statutory consultees do consider that is acceptable. And I mean, I went out on site today to take those pictures. We have had some rain recently. I mean, it was by no means bone dry, but I didn't notice any particular issues on there. It looked quite well walked, and as far as I'm aware, there hasn't been any significant issues that have rendered it sort of unusable or unsafe. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Powling, are you happy with what councillor Davison is suggesting?
Yeah, I believe what my proposal is and what councillor Davis is saying is that where the allotments are is to actually get the soil to a reasonable depth up to 600 mil. But on the rest of the site, it's not doing the whole site with it. Like they do in agriculture, they do something called molding. So it's not like putting in pipe work. They will literally put a tractor on it with this massive, goes down about 800 mil, and you literally just drive it in straight lines towards where you want the water to go. So that is why it only gets possibly done once on, when they're on agricultural machinery that are going on it regularly, they have to redo it. But because this is low area, it must be done once and it'll be fine. And it go to wherever the ditch is or a pond. So my proposal is 600 mil with the, for the allotments, for the soil quality and possibly the drainage, rest of it, which is a machine rather than all the soil being done.
Okay, so I'm now going to ask the clerk whether he can nail down what it is between you are recommending as a condition. Councillor Davis.
Yes, on the basis that the parish council have been consulted and they haven't objected to the current plan, I'd like to withdraw my drainage plan. They can always raise funds and do it themselves at a later date.
Thank you for that. So we are left with Councillor Powling wanting the 600 mil on the allotments. Okay, if you could clarify, Richard, what the condition is.
Thank you, Chair. I think what the Councillor Powling is proposing then is a variation to the condition so that it's a 600 millimetre depth of soil on the allotment area.
Correct. Right, so therefore, Councillor Powling, are you proposing that we accept the officer recommendation with the condition that's just been clarified?
Yeah, free of rubble, of course, you know, good quality soil.
And good quality soil. Right. Okay, is there a seconder to that proposal? Councillor Tate. Anybody wishes to speak on it, or can we move to a vote? No hands shown, so all those in favour?
And that's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, members. We move on to our last item on the agenda, which is 7.4, 50 London Road, Stanway, Colchester. And I would like to make a statement, and that is that following the receipt of a request for a site visit from Councillor Scott Littell for application 7.4, 242242 50 London Road, Stanway, Colchester, Essex, I have considered this request in detail and concluded that a site visit would not take place for the following reasons. The committee undertook a site visit to the area on the 13th of June 24 to view the application 232295, the old post office, where they viewed the surroundings of the site, which would include the scale of the surrounding area and the highways in the area. However, as this is not the same application, I've asked the case officer to provide additional materials to the committee to ensure that their understanding of the application is complete. If, following the presentation, speakers and debate of the item, members wish to go on a site visit, then this can be put forward as a proposal to the committee. Can I invite Chris Harding to present the report?
Thank you, Chairman. So the application is at 50 London Road, Stanway, and it's a proposed change of use of a former outbuilding, which was in association with the former post office on the site, to a barber use only within Class E of the use classes order. So I'll just take you through the site. So this is the red line application site. At the front here is the former post office main building, and the outbuilding in question for the barbers will be located here. And this is the block plan annotated. So there was parking at the front of the site shown in association with the cafe. There is no parking in relation to this proposal for the barber. It would be a single barber only, and that is conditioned, as you'll see in the committee report. There's a cycle store being put up at the back here, and it's proposed to add another 2 cycle storage points within that store there. So I'll just quickly show you pictures of the site, the layout. So basically this is the outbuilding. The proposal would be to have one barber in the building. There are front doors here to it that have already been installed of a glazed opening. So this is the front, the glazing already in place. This is the side view. There aren't any additional openings going in the side elevation. Those are already there. Now quickly through the photos of the site. So this is the footage of the site, the Old London Cafe situated in here. And down the side here you've got access to the outbuilding. So that's the access to the outbuilding to the rear. Neighbouring dwelling here. You can just see the glazed area at the front of the outbuilding. Inside, the barber's chair has already been put in. You'll note there are 2 barber's chairs there. So a better view of them. It is for one barber only and will be conditioned as such, as you'll see from the committee report. This is a view of the rear of the property. The flue that was put up in association with the cafe. And this is a picture of the cycle store. It's unfortunately come out a bit blurred for some reason. It takes 7 cycles with these elements in here. It's covered with this sort of mono-pitched roof, and the aim is to provide 2 more spaces for cycles. So I'll just take you back to the plan while I do my presentation. We've received one more letter of objection, which basically makes a number of points, so I'll quickly report those. The letter says it's not a parade of shops opposite the site, but it is a builder's merchants, funeral director and a farm shop. The doors have been in situ for months, and as are the other fixtures and fittings within the building. Customers will not arrive on foot. The parking conditions previously applied have been broken continually, and this will make the situation worse. So in terms of planning considerations, in principle, the local plan policies and the NPPF are supportive of economic development, particularly in sustainable locations such as this site here. So the proposal should therefore be judged on its planning merits. Those include neighbouring residential amenity, environmental protection, and not raise objections to the scheme subject to the detailed conditions as shown in the committee report. That includes hours of opening and as listed, and also the fact that it'll be one barber only at any one time and by appointment only, as you'll see in the condition. So given the low-key nature of what is considered to be an appropriate use, it is not considered to be a proposal that would be detrimental to neighbouring residential amenity by reason of noise, dust or odours, subject to those detailed conditions in the report. So turning to highways matters, take you back to the site. No parking is proposed in association for the barber use. The Highway Authority have raised no objections in this respect. It's considered likely that customers can arrive a variety of other means, such as walking from the local area or cycling or other means of transport that is available within the area. So it's a highly sustainable location. So it's not considered that parking provision for the barber is actually required. And you'll note it's concluded that the proposal would not cause a severe impact on the road network, which is one of the NPPF tests as detailed in the committee report. The proposal is therefore considered acceptable in terms of highway issues and would not conflict with local plan policies in this respect. So finally, in terms of other issues, the alterations to the building are considered to be visually acceptable. The fact that there's been a non-compliance with some of the conditions that were applied on the cafe is basically a separate issue and is not a reason to actually preclude a favourable recommendation on the barber use. You will note that there is an enforcement case on various conditions in relation to the cafe, and the enforcement team and myself are in dialogue with the applicant to bring those issues to a swift conclusion. It's not considered there are any drainage issues, so the recommendation is I can recommend approval. The certificate B has expired, and therefore we can go for a straight approval with the conditions outlined in the committee report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Could I invite the visiting councillor, Councillor Scott Littell, to come forward and speak? She's already here. When you press the button, you'll get 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Many of you will remember the retrospective application 232295 for change of use from the Post Office Delivery Office to Cafe, which was debated 3 times at committee and a lot of time given to impose conditions so that the application received approval and was workable. I'm sure that you also remember that the barbers being spoken about because of the concerns raised about this and other retrospective issues. It was advised that this would be treated as a separate application. A breach of condition notice has been served on the owners of the cafe for failing to discharge a number of planning conditions, namely 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 19 and 20. That's 12 out of 20 not complied with. Because the breach of condition notice has not been complied with within the statutory time limit imposed, 3 months, a file will now be submitted to legal for the consideration of a prosecution. I will also mention the next retrospective application received was signage to the front elevation. I queried the wires left exposed and hanging, and planning were advised that they would be removed. They weren't, but 2 uplighters and downlighters were installed without permission. No action taken. This is some of the background to the application that you see before you tonight. It is stated in the application that no work has started. This is incorrect and appeared to be ready to open last January with 2 barbers' chairs already in situ, along with 2 sinks, 2 mirrors, etc., etc. The planning officer advised that the 2 chairs were still there when he visited site this week. There is clearly another retrospective application, and they are applying for 1 only barber's chair. Why apply retrospectively for 1 when there are already 2 installed and ready to start work? I move on to vehicle parking, specifically cycle parking. Committee will have seen the photos of the cycle parking installed. It is an eyesore to residents who overlook and only delivers, I think, 6 spaces, not the 12 that are claimed to be there. So with the extra 2 for the barbers, there should be 14 in total. Again, this is another breach of the cycle parking on site is not in accordance with the submitted plans received 27th of June 24. I remember there were queries on waste collection and storage, and it states it's in line with CCC requirements. Can you expand on that, please? Especially as there's a further breach for refuse and recycling facilities, which should be provided in the outbuilding as shown on the approved block plan. I note that the revised planning statement makes an interesting read. It talks about the parade of shops opposite, sandwich shop, butcher's, convenience store, Indian restaurant. This is not opposite 50 London Road, Stanway, but is situated in the parade of shops on London Road, Marks Tay. It also states that only pedestrian access will be possible to the barbers, in which case, how do they access the cycle storage at the rear of the cafe? There is already a condition breached on precise details of the rear customer door, which should include a glazed vision panel and rear of ground level lighting. There is also another application in to vary condition 4 for the cafe to alter its opening hours. There's no mention of extending the barber's opening hours, but these retrospective applications are linked, and I fail to see how the barbers can be improved while the cafe is still going through due process for enforcement due to non-compliance with conditions imposed. I think committee need to either refuse, defer, or ask for it to be withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And can I invite Chris and Simon to respond to the points raised?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, it's clear that the cafe conditions are not being complied with in their entirety, and there is an enforcement case for that. that would not be a reason to refuse a barber's in the site. The barber, whilst obviously the sites are linked, there wouldn't be a reason to say refuse the barbers when you've got a breach of condition on the cafe use. It's not a planning reason to refuse it. There is one barber proposed, so regardless of the number of chairs, the condition will say that there will be one barber only at any one time. The barber could use 2 chairs, get a customer in, and another customer leaves. But the condition is there to restrict it to one barber at any one time. If they want another chair in there, could we really control the number of chairs or the number of sinks? I would say that's debatable. I think the key thing is the intensity of use, which is conditioned as one barber. If they want more than one barber, they will have to make another application for that to vary the condition. It's clear that some of the barbers' work started a long time ago, but it has not been in use as a barber's. Vehicle parking is not required for the barbers. Cycle parking, more can be provided. It certainly looks like there is space for 7. Would you want 14, 15, 16? We could ensure there are more cycle spaces, but that's creating rather a lot of cycle parking. The cycle parking building is pretty low, and I think it'd be difficult to argue it's an eyesore or something that should be removed or visually revised. There are other ways of providing a cycle store. Some of them are sort of curved roofs, can go taller. But in this context, I think it's difficult to say you can't have this cycle store in this form. It's behind a wall. It's visible over the wall. The top of it is, but it's in the back garden. Difficult to say you can't have this form of cycle store. Yes, the point about the proximity of other shops is noted, and that's been reported in my presentation, the extra comment. Again, the fact that you haven't got a parade of shops opposite this site is not a reason to refuse this application. It's a bit of an error in the statement, but there are shops and buildings and other commercial premises in that street all along the road, as you're obviously familiar from previous site visits. Yep, there is a new application into varied condition 4 for some Sunday opening for the cafe, but again, that's a separate application, not a reason to refuse the barbers. So at this stage, I can't see there's a reason to refuse this barber application, and I can't see it's justified that you actually defer it or withdraw it, because the barber can stand alone compared to the cafe. It's a low-key use. It's probably one of the lower key uses you would have in this former commercial outbuilding. There could be a lot more other uses that are potentially more disturbing. So my recommendation would be to approve this, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to let Councillor Arnold come in first, as she's the local member, okay?
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions. When we had a previous site visit, I don't remember, I am full of cold, so it is, bear with me. At the very end, on the new plans, is that a building? Is that the bike shed at the back, right at the very end of the property? And then, how do they access this bike shed? Because in the pictures there's gates, there's a car, there's a van behind the car. So why would we want to try and get more bikes around there when you physically cannot get to it? Opening times, I would like some clarity on that. And also, where are the customer toilets for this facility? Thank you.
Okay, and next speaker is Councillor Rippingale.
So, it returns. I think the hours of the barbers should be the same as the cafe. So if I remember correctly, that was 6 p.m. There's no reason for them to be different. Remind me of the conditions. I know the cafe isn't linked, but in terms of the parking off-site, it's mentioned in the report as a provision. I've actually driven past that site several times on my way to drop off little man to mum, and there are cars parked on that site that are for sale. So those spaces are not being used for the allocated parking that we all spent many, many hours discussing. My point about cycle spaces has been already discussed. I had thought we'd conditioned more than I saw on that drawing. But I agree with you, Chris, we probably don't need to go excessively on the cycle parking for a barber's, but I would like to see what we'd actually conditioned there. We all know work had started on that site when we visited in June. It was deliberately boarded up with paper so that we couldn't see in there. They knew we were coming and they knew that we would. So work had commenced on that site without the planning permission. And I think we need to be realistic about that. I also remember a discussion around the vehicle access on that side part of the road and the gates, that wouldn't be used for parking or vehicle access long term. So obviously I'm concerned that if we put a barber's there, what's stopping anyone parking there? I suppose my question to the planners and to the committee is, what is the material planning condition that we could defer on or refuse here? Because all of these are linked to the cafe, and I suppose to some respects much of the committee is predetermined on this because we've had a bad experience on the previous application. So for us it's very difficult, those who were on the planning committee, to not link it to the original application of the cafe. And obviously now hearing that the conditions that we spent hours on aren't being complied with is obviously not, I know from my perspective, my decision making may be slightly impaired in this and whether I need to remove myself.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Rippingale. Your latter question was one I anticipated, and I saw advice from officers as to whether there was any fit and proper person criteria when it comes to planning applications, and there's nothing other than relating to record on delivery for major developments. So I would say you have to have a blank sheet when you're looking at this particular proposal and deal with the proposal on its merits. I wonder if Simon has any views on that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think officers all share members' frustration with this particular applicant and failure to carry through. However, planning permission does run with the land. It isn't a personal permission to this applicant. So I think we do, however difficult it is, have to divorce ourselves from past performance. In terms of the use, it is a very low-key use. It's not unusual for people to cut hair from home. So, we do have to regard this as a use that often goes on in residential areas or in quite mixed use areas, such as London Road. In terms of the number of trips it'll generate, it is one barber's. It's not unusual in traditional parades of shops or other commercial areas to have barbers which have no parking at all, or no cycle parking either. People just ruck up on foot, have their hair cut and walk away. I totally get the point around the frustration that work had commenced, but the fact that a developer commenced work is not an offence. It's not an offence to carry out an authorised development. So however frustrating that is, the use hadn't commenced, which I think is the main thing. This is principally a change of use, not the installation of furniture or a sink. Primarily use we're concerned about. So I totally understand members' frustration, and particularly that of the ward councillor. It is deeply frustrating that after so much effort, those conditions in part have seemingly been ignored. But we do have very effective planning enforcement tools in terms of a breach condition, which will potentially lead to prosecution, which does tend to focus the mind. So I do understand how members' feelings on this, but I am really struggling to identify any substantive reasons for refusal. You know, normally one would look to see something such as an intensification of use leading to a materially harmful impact on the residential amenity of neighbours. I don't really see that with this. You know, somebody in a shed cutting someone's hair, I don't really see how you can really demonstrate a materially harmful impact. Much as, you know, if I could, I would be up there to support you members, but I'm really struggling to find that. And hence the application is recommended for approval, albeit reluctantly. It is a very tough one, as was the last one, and I know Councillor Scott Mattel will probably want to say, I told you so, and she did. But we are nevertheless in the same position insofar as we are clutching at straws to find material reasons to refuse again.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, Councillor Tate.
Yeah, my point has really been covered by Councillors Rippingale and Arnold. Picture, we all know there's issues with parking, and the picture actually beautifully illustrated it, annoyingly enough. It would, you know, it'd be lovely if there was no cars down the side, but there was two, there was a car and a van. So there actually is a health and safety issue. I don't know if that's relevant. But in this wonderful utopia where people only go to get their hair cut on bike, they can't get their bikes down there. So I appreciate that that's a very small reason. And this is, I know it's not related, but I seem to recall it's kind of, I seem to recall us spending a long time discussing the flu on the other one, and it was, it's the ugliest flu I've ever seen, so I don't know if that's been looked at.
Okay, thank you, but we do need to have the blank sheet and stick to the planning application that we are looking at. So if members could do that, I would appreciate it. So Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I have concerns about the usage on this site. We've seen the pictures, we've seen the haphazard parking, we've seen the very limited access to this new barber's building. I wonder about proposing a temporary permission for this barber, which would give both the barber and the cafe time to get their act in order.
Thank you. And Councillor Gocha.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what Councillor Davidson's just said. I also think we need rigid conditions on. I mean, why on earth would you put two barbers' chairs in if you're only going to have one barber? There's only one reason that springs to my mind. So I think why can't we condition that there is one barber's chair and there's a waiting area? I know what a barber's waiting area looks like. It's not a barber's chair. So why not have a waiting area on one chair and have to remove the other chair? Why can't we condition that? Secondly, parking. I'm not sure why we don't need to provide more parking provision. They're obviously going to drive there. Let's be honest, they're not going to cycle, they're not going to take the bus, they're going to drive there. So why aren't we providing a condition that there has to be extra parking, to use the barbers? I mean, I wasn't impressed by the picture of the cycle store, I must admit, but there is a cycle store. But again, we need to make sure that cycle store is accessible. There shouldn't be cars all parked in the way of it. Can we put conditions in on that score? And I just think we need to be robust in the conditions. And I totally agree with what Councillor Davison said about having a trial period.
Thank you. Councillor Spindler.
I passed on to Tracy Arnold, but yeah, it was just about the access to the side of the building, having the, what do you call it? Hatching marking, so nothing can park in that area at all. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Arnold? No, they were together. Okay, so Chris and Simon, where you feel you need to come in, can you respond to the issues that were raised?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Temporary permission is possible. Other points, restricting it to one barber chair might well not meet the tests for a condition to say you can't have another chair. I mean, it's not development within the building to have another chair. They could just do it. I would potentially have concerns about saying you can only have one barber's chair. I think it might be an ultra-virus condition, to be honest. Waiting area, again, could be difficult to say you've got to have a waiting area. Parking down the driveway, I think there is potential to condition that so that there's no parking in front of the outbuilding and no parking along the side of the main cafe, which will then make sure people can walk down there and get their bicycles down there to the cycle store. So I think that would be a realistic condition. Yes, the trial period of I don't know how many years you'd want to put on that as a trial period. But as they've already done the expenditure, sort of providing the barbers in the building, it's not like they're risking a lot of capital now. So I think there is potential to do that. I think that probably covers those latest points. If there's anything else you want me to cover on that?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, what about the idea of putting hatching down the side so it says no parking? To make it obvious to bystanders passing by, who can then help inform enforcement officers if they see it happening. Also, as you can tell, I go to the barbers quite often, and I would say it's reasonable to have two chairs. The reason being is because what often happens is that you will sit in a chair that hasn't been used whilst the junior cleans the area around the chair that has been used, and they will sweep up and they will make sure it is hygienic for the next customer. So I can quite understand why one barber would use two chairs. So I think the conditioning of one barber makes sense, but the conditioning to one chair doesn't, for those operational reasons that I have just described. So, right. So, Councillor Arnold, yes?
Can we just clarify, sorry, on the plans where we clarify exactly where the bike shed is? Is it opposite the proposed barber's shop now? So what is the little yellow square building right at the very end that wasn't there before?
Yes, Chairman, just to clarify, the existing cycle store is opposite the outbuilding on the boundary, basically, in the rear garden. The little yellow square, I don't know, is that right near the very end of the
Right at the back of
plot?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. It's not proposed for anything. Whether it's still there or not, I really don't know, but...
It wasn't there before, that's all.
No, it's not proposed for anything.
Okay, thank you. Now, Councillor Powling, I would dearly like to get done by 9 o'clock so we don't have to suspend standing orders. Are you wanting to add to things? Because if you're just wanting to go over and agree with what's been said, I'd rather you didn't.
I was just happy to second Councillor Davis with the parking.
Right.
But there was one question about the toilet as well that hasn't been answered.
Excuse me now, one question about the toilet.
I had asked a question about the toilets, but I forgot.
And that hasn't been answered, is that what you're saying? Right, can we have an answer to that, please?
There is a toilet in the cafe, which I assume someone can use if they really need to. Basically, there's not a toilet proposed in the Barbers.
Right, do I recall something in the previous application that was restricting the use of the toilets? So like people that weren't customers could not come and use the toilet, no?
There were restrictions, Chair, in relation to providing a disabled accessibility toilet.
Okay, so let's try and get this to a conclusion. So Councillor Davison, seconded by Councillor Powling, is proposing a temporary permission is given. Would you be willing to incorporate into that a condition around restricted parking down the side and hatching in order to make that visible to the public?
I was going to say exactly that, Chairman. Add it to it. That's right. Remove parking along the side of the building.
Thank you. So, Richard, can you just clarify what is being proposed?
I'm so sorry. There's still members that are still querying something over there by the sounds of it.
Match the cafe if we're saying that they have to use the toilet in the cafe, then surely the opening hours have to match the cafe, is my thinking.
Right, thank you. Thank you for that. So before I ask Richard to clarify, is there any members here that are unsure about anything? Because I don't want this backwards and forwarding, interrupting and trying to nail it down. Right, there is nothing else. Richard, could you please clarify?
Thank you, Chair. I think we're in a position where we have a proposal to accept the recommendation with additional, on the basis of a temporary permission for a year, and an additional condition whereby hatching is delivered down the side of the cafe to prevent parking on that area of the site. And it has also been suggested that the hours of operation of the Barbers must match those of the cafe.
And that is in order to facilitate the toilet facilities. The only thing I would add is, would it be possible to have the words "no parking" on the hatching, so members of the public going by, it becomes obvious that there should be no parking? Are we there? Chris?
Just one point. We've got an application in to allow some opening hours of the cafe on Sunday. If that is approved, do you want to allow the Barbers to then tie in with those opening hours for the Sunday? Because it's not proposed to use the Barbers on Sunday. So you'd have to say, shall match the cafe's hours excluding Sundays.
Okay, Councillor Rivingale.
I think we should confirm that it's 6 o'clock, which is what the hours are now. Yes. And no Sundays.
Okay, right. Richard, you need to go over it again, just so people are absolutely clear, and I'm not taking any more clarifications. We are going to vote on this.
Right. So it's a temporary permission for a year. So we're proposing the application is approved subject to the conditions in the report with additional conditions. So with temporary permission for a year, the provision of hatching and no parking signage along the side of the cafe, the hours of operation to match that of the cafe except no opening on Sundays.
I can see lots of nodding heads. Councillor Rivingale, are you happy with that?
Well, like we said, if it's going to, we approve change of hours, are we content with it being open?
We're not suggesting that it always matches the cafe, but the cafe's current hours. We can't sort of say whatever that does, we'll always do it, I don't think.
Right. Chris, please clarify the open
Yeah, I think we can put a condition on saying, well, what I can do is put the condition on that are exactly the same as the cafe hours as was previously approved, but and no Sunday hours.
And our rationale for that is to align the use of toilet. Yes. Okay, thank you. Happy to go to the vote?
Yeah.
Right, okay. All those in favour, please show.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, members. A lot of stuff to go through, but we've got it done within the 3 hours with 5 minutes to spare. Have a good evening.